But it was not a scale neutral technology. That implies that not everyone is equally getting the benefits. The scale is not the same. Some will get more benefits, some will not get any benefits, some will be at losses. If you are a small farmer, if you are taking loans to purchase high yield variety seeds, to set up irrigation facilities, to purchase fertilizers and all those things, your returns will be very less and you will be indebted now. So it was not a scale neutral technology. So some people are becoming affluent, on the other hand, some people are becoming poorer. So there is increase in relative deprivation as well. So during this phase, you had some sort of a crisis situation. There was turmoil everywhere. There was some sort of discontentment. Now what happened? Did women organizations do anything at this point of time? How did they contribute? Contribute not in terms of turmoil. How did they contribute in shaping the direction? Shramik Mahila Sangathan, 1971, right? It mobilized women from lower middle classes, working classes, right? Those who are being affected by the economic crisis, economic hardships. It is raising these concerns. Shahada movement, it was a tribal landless laborers movement against the landlords in Maharashtra. Seva, something that we have already discussed, Ila Bhatt's organization. It organized poor women from the unorganized sector and it provided them different kinds of support. Trained them, technical and collective support it provided. Then you have anti-price movements in western part of India. So in these movements, women in urban areas, they came together. They're protesting against the rising prices. Nav Nirman movement. Initially it was a students movement in Gujarat, but middle class women also joined. And they were raising questions, they're raising their concerns about the rising prices, about hoarding, black marketing, dishonesty. In 1974, a report came out towards equality report. It basically analyzed the status of women. And it found that the status of women is not only low, but it is ever decreasing. And at this point of time, it raised, there was multiple concerns raised in different quarters. See, at this point of time, 1974, right? We became independent in 1947. It was assumed that once we become independent, we'll have things in our own hands. We will make our own policies. We will address our own concerns. Before this, if things were bad, you can always blame it on the colonial government, right? British government. But now already, it's almost reaching 30 years, right? 1947 to 1974. Things are in your own hand. You have the government. You are the ones who are deciding your own government. All the political institutions are run by you. But the situation of women is becoming worse. So this raised alarm at that point of time. It brought to the attention the issues that women have been facing. Right? So what are some of the issues that were taken up at this point of time? There were multiple organizations, multiple groups, they had their own agendas, they had their own issues. But some of the common things that were taken up was the division of housework, sexual division of work. It is typically the women who will be carrying out all these housework. And in fact, even now that continues. We saw how in India, women, they spend significantly large amount of time, 299 minutes on an average as compared to 100 minutes for males, right? Unpaid care work. So at that point of time also it was being raised. It talked about party politics. Women's representation in politics is very minimal. Many of these organizations also talked about the increase in sexual violence. For example, rape. It also talked about domestic violence, dowry deaths. And that particular report, towards the equality report, also talked about the uniform civil code. When it comes to personal laws, you do not have uniformity along that. Hindus might have their own laws, Muslims might have their own laws. So you do not have uniformity over there. So that towards equality report had talked about uniform civil code. And this also finds mention, by the way, in the directive principles of the state policy. So this is how the situation looked like from late 1960s to 1975. 1975 to date, what has been the situation? What is the context? 1970s onwards, there has been steady increase in different women organizations, and 80s onwards, another trend is also observed. Till this point of time, the focus was on improving the situation of women, overall, amelioration of situation of women. But now you realize that you already have created different mechanisms. You have different institutions, maybe, you have different laws, maybe. Dowry Prohibition Act is already there, right? And many other laws were there. Maternity Benefit Acts will be there. You have the Constitution. But despite all these things, you will have situations where some of these rights will not be protected. Some of these entitlements we will not get. So till this point of time, the focus was on overall improving the situation, getting all these laws in place, getting all this framework in place. Now the focus is shifting to realization of rights. If there is a law to prohibit dowry, how come someone is asking this particular female for dowry? That is realization of rights, right? So those kind of cases were taken up by women organizations. So that is a shift. In 1992, a new thing happened. National Commission for Women was also formed, and we have already discussed National Commission for Women and what are some of the mandates and what are some of the limitations of it. And at this point of time, you have different kinds of women organizations. As the economy changes, technology changes, issues that women face are also changing. As a result of which, you are now having women organizations which are taking up these kind of causes. For example, in the last 10-20 years, there is proliferation of information technology everywhere. Right? We're all connected. As a result of which, what happens? The different kinds of crimes that were committed against women, that is also changing. New forms of crimes have also emerged. Cyber crime specifically targeting women, that has also emerged. Sexual harassment, maybe at some point of time, when it comes to sexual harassment, only sexual harassment at a physical space would have been considered. But now, because of telework, work from home and all the things, when it comes to sexual harassment, you look at those angles as well. Even if an individual, a female, is working from home, there's a possibility of she being sexually harassed, right? So even if she's working from home, right, maybe different kinds of colored remarks are made, right? Lewd remarks are made, even on a video call or a phone call. So many organizations have come up which are now looking at these new dimensions, right? So as times change, problems changes, issues changes, and organizations have also emerged to take up this thing. So this is how women organizations have emerged over a period of time, evolved over a period of time. Now the question is, we now know about the type of women organizations, type of issues, their limitations, their challenges. What are some of the methods women organizations typically use? What are some of the strategies that they have typically used? They will organize different kinds of events, conventions, seminars, conferences, workshops. So in this, they will have different researchers, people from academia, people who are from the industry, people who are intellectuals. They will debate, discuss different kinds of ideas. They will discuss different kinds of problems. They will discuss different kinds of potential solutions to the problems. Right? So, and again, whatever ideas comes up here, it is disseminated to the larger public. They organize different kinds of meetings and rallies. Right? When you have these public meetings and rallies, you are trying to change the perception of the public. You are trying to change the existing values and norms. Many times they will be writing for the media. Maybe many times they will give interviews to media. Right? And as a result of which, they will reach to a larger audience. Sometimes they will have more focused interventions. In mohallas, they will have meetings. Right? Some places people will be staying, residential area, they will go and again discuss different kinds of issues over there. When they are talking in the media, right, when they are giving an interview in a media outlet, maybe, it is not a two-way interaction, right? They will give their viewpoints. The leader of that women organization might give their viewpoints. That's it. But when you have public meetings, when you have mohalla meetings, when you have dialogues and discussions, it is two-way, right? The public, whoever is there, part of the public, they might have some concerns. They might not understand some of these bits. The women organizations can clarify it further. So they are all, in all these methods, you can see what they're trying to do is they're trying to raise the critical consciousness of the people. They're trying to change the values norms. They are trying to define those values and norms. It is basically a bottom-up struggle. When the state is trying to bring about changes, through the constitution or through different kinds of laws. It is mostly a top-down thing. At the top, you have made a law, and now everyone has to follow that. But what women organizations are trying to do is they're using a different approach. At the bottom, they are trying to create awareness. They're bringing in changes in perception. So it's a bottom-up struggle. So these are all different strategies that are used by women organizations. Now, we know who are the women organizations, what are the women organizations, we know what are the activities they are doing. Now the question is, have they been completely successful? Have they been able to ensure equality? Have they been able to ensure that all the different kinds of issues that women face, has that been eliminated from the Indian society? Or maybe marginally they have been able to address that, right? Maybe the discrepancy was this. Now maybe it has gone down, right? Women's position has slightly improved. So if you look at it now also, different kinds of challenges do exist, right? In the first few sessions, in the first few discussions that we had under this broader topic, we saw that how child sex ratio has actually become worse, how women's labor force participation rate has actually declined, right? And it tends to be low. Domestic violence exists, continues. Gender pay gap is there, right? So all these things point to the fact that maybe women's position has not changed drastically, and in some areas maybe it has become worse. So what is preventing them from being effective? What is hindering their performance? So some points here that can help us get this perspective. See, these women organizations, they need funds to operate. And in case of India, we have already seen, if you have already studied the developmental sector, right? Non-governmental organizations, non-profit sector, right? They find it difficult to raise revenue. Domestic funding is restricted. Another option is they can try to get some funds from outside, foreign funding. But whenever you get funds from outside, you have to again go through multiple rules, regulations. And it also gives the state some leverage, in the sense that since there is over-regulation, you are also vulnerable. At any point of time, the state can scrap your, at any point of time, need not necessarily scrap it, but they have a leverage, right? They can put different kinds of restrictions on you. So funding does not come easily. Then they might not have enough support from the government. Some NGOs do get, but not all NGOs, right? So limited support they get. From the public also, not necessarily they will always have support. NGOs, women organizations should ideally be able to communicate what they are trying to do, how important is this, right? And that can be one of the ways by which they can attract the public's attention. But that might also be lacking sometimes. Many of these organizations do not have full-time, dedicated, committed personnel. In fact, that's relevant for the voluntary sector in India. Very few organizations have full-time employees. Most of them are running with the help of volunteers. The volunteers are the ones who will not be even getting any salaries. And again, they will be having some other day job maybe. So this gets sidelined. Apart from that, most of these women organizations, they have not focused much on political participation. Ideally, what should have happened? These women organizations could have been those training grounds for future women leaders, right? Who are the leaders in the women organizations can in future participate in elections, maybe local body elections, maybe state legislative assembly elections or national elections. But that transition has not happened. Again, maybe because overall, if you look at politics in India, anyway, women's participation is very less, and maybe the political structures are not conducive. So if that would have happened, maybe more women could have participated in politics. But that has not happened. They have not been able to focus on mass mobilization. They have not been able to increase political awareness and efficacy. So all these things limits them. Funds, capacity, right, power, everything gets limited. So what is the way ahead maybe? See, the focus of women organizations should be on women education, empowerment, entrepreneurship. All these things makes women empowered, it makes them more capable, and they will have greater agency. Right? We have already seen how some of these things are extremely relevant. Apart from that, they need to expose women to higher levels of knowledge so that different kinds of cultural beliefs, prejudices, taboos, they're all eliminated. The different kinds of cultural barriers, societal barriers that are there, that can be taken care of. Right? So, maybe this should be the focus of the women organizations. And with this, we also come to the end of our discussion on issues related to women. Right? What are the mechanisms for vulnerable sections like women, and what is the role of women organizations? So we started with understanding what are some of the issues women face. Right? We saw that life cycle approach, how at different stages of their life, women face different kinds of violence, discrimination. Then we looked at some of these things: domestic violence, unpaid care, work burden, sexual harassment at workplace, low labor force participation rate, women and participation in politics. All these things we saw. And we saw, though we have different kinds of mechanisms, the mechanisms might not be completely effective. What needs to be done better? Then we looked at the institution, National Commission for Women, how effective it has been or it has not been. Then we looked at women's organization. This is something which is part of General Studies Paper 1, but since we are talking about women issues, makes sense to study them together. And as I was mentioning, we should have a bird's eye view rather than restricting ourselves into certain modules. Right? So this is about women issues. I hope you now have a better understanding of the issues that women face, and again, better idea of what kind of solutions can be there at the policy level, at the administrative level, etc. So let's look at some of the questions which have been asked in the past. Women's movement in India has not addressed the issue of women of lower strata. Substantiate our view. So something that we're just talking about, right? What kind of issues they have taken up. Now, how do you answer this question? Look at women's organizations from the past. Who were part of this women's organization? Mostly male, upper class, upper caste, right? They were not really aware of issues that possibly women from the lower strata face. Then later on also, right, whatever issues are being taken up, who are most likely going to be the leaders of this organization? Most likely women from upper classes, or at least the middle classes, right? Most likely women from the lower socioeconomic background might not be part of these organizations. Typically, who are the ones who will be extremely passionate, who will start these kind of institutions? Mostly who are educated, mostly who are from the middle classes, middle class. So the nature of leadership also decides what kind of issues will be taken up. Apart from that, talk about what are the specific issues that women from the lower socioeconomic strata face, and talk about what are the issues that have usually been taken up. Right? There is a divergence over there. Then you talk about some of the systemic problems that women organizations have. Funding issue, government support, public support, bunch of things. All these things limit the performance of these organizations. So all these things you have to put together and you can answer it. Now, is the National Commission for Women able to strategize and tackle problems that women face at both public and private sphere? Give reasons to support your answer. This is something which is kind of straightforward. If you have studied National Commission for Women, what are some of the issues? Autonomy issues, appointment, membership issues, staffing issues, all those things. Right? If you have studied all these things, you can easily find out, answer this question. Right? If you know what are the problems. All these things will give you an idea that they are not able to take up issues. They have not taken bold initiatives. They're all chairperson centric. Right? They might not necessarily be attracting the most competitive individuals. They might not be attracting all the passionate individuals. As a result of which, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, or they have not been able to meet the mandates, right? Whatever they have been mandated to do, they have not been able to meet that. As a result of which, the problems exist both in public and private sphere. Keep in mind that you should also talk about some of these problems that exist in the public and private sphere. Public sphere, you can talk about sexual harassment at workplace, gender pay gap. You can talk about women's low labor force participation rate. Private sphere, you can talk about dowry deaths. You can talk about domestic violence and other things. Unpaid care burden also you can talk about. So give those numbers and then say what limits the National Commission of Women performance. Next question. How does patriarchy impact the position of middle class working women in India? This is something which is linked with the first topic as well, right? Social issues. There we talked about class, family and all, right? So there is a linkage between that. . 。  . 。 。 . 。 . . 。 . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . 。 . . . 。 . . . 。 . 。 . 。 . . 。 . . 。 . . 。 . . degradation of the environment. Also in recent time is the prevalence of dowry. One of the issue that women face is the issue of dowry. So